Hello, I'm Bernard Hickey from interest.co.nz and welcome to a long-term economic weather report brought to you in association with BNZ. Today we're going to have a look at the wage gap between Australia and New Zealand. We're minding the gap. This has been a big issue politically, economically for the last few years, but the noise has gone a bit quiet in recent months. Remember, we had the 2025 task force from Don Brash, and that was flicked into touch pretty quickly by the Prime Minister John Key. And since then we've had the budget reforms, and there's a few people assuming, that'll be enough to close the gap with Australia. Well, unfortunately, the signs in recent weeks are, if anything, the gap has widened in the last 2 years and is likely to keep widening if we keep our current policy settings. Let's look at some of the figures. Firstly, Australian wages are now growing at 5.5% per annum. Now, there's a couple of factors there. Australia has got a mining boom, the biggest it's seen in 100 years. It's got reasonably strong immigration growth, at least for now, and it's been one of the best performing economies in the world in the last 3 or 4 years. Unemployment there is 5.1% and falling. Meanwhile, New Zealand wage growth only 1.5% or so, and our unemployment rate is up to 6.8%. So the pressure is on there. Low unemployment in Australia, high wage growth. New Zealand, high unemployment, low wage growth. And we're starting to see migration turning because of that. And unfortunately, it's going to get worse. When you look at the average weekly wage gap, it has actually grown about $100 a week just in the last 2 years alone. You'd be $643 a week better off in Australia on average. New Zealand wages now are worth about 60% of the average Aussie wage. Now that's down from 66%, 2/3, a couple of years ago. If we continue at the current rate, New Zealand's average wages will be about half those in Australia within 7 years. Migration too is starting to pick up back to Australia. You can have a look at this chart here, which shows how over the mid-1990s and through the 2000s, we saw immigration to Australia really pick up. And it hit its worst point in 2007, 2008, just before the election. It was a big election issue. Then we saw an improvement through 2008 and early 2009 as the New Zealand economy seemed to fare okay and Australia had a bit of a dip. But it has turned again quite sharply in recent months. As New Zealanders, seeing unemployment rising here, seeing wages growth over in Australia much faster, are moving. When you look at the numbers, you can see that we've seen a significant number of New Zealanders go in the last few weeks. We are looking at around 100 New Zealanders a day leaving to go and live in Australia full time. And the numbers of New Zealanders migrating is up 32% from a year ago. We are essentially seeing a hole opening up in New Zealand's demography. A group of people, often young, often well-skilled, certainly hard-working, often trained in New Zealand, are looking to leave. They're going to live in Australia. What is our government doing to try and fix this problem? They say they're doing enough. They say the 2025 task force was too radical. But at this rate, New Zealand looks like being a nation of retirees, of farmers, and of beneficiaries who aren't supported by anyone working and paying income because they'll be living somewhere else. Is that really the New Zealand we want? That's my personal view anyway. But it's clear from these figures, and you look at them, you can see here the gap between New Zealand and Australian wages is up now to $32,000 a year on average. And when you look at New Zealand's percentage of Australian wages, it's dropped from over 70% as recently as 2003-04 to well under 60% in the next year or two. And remember, hitting 50% within 7 years. I'm Bernard Hickey. That was a special long-term economic weather report on Minding the Gap, brought to you in association with BNZ.